Alright guys, welcome to VALORANT News. Major reaction in the Americas to the big results going down last night. 100 Thieves and Gen.G after their escapades out in Saudi Arabia, trying to make a run towards the World Championship qualification with dominant victories last night. Loud, and especially the Brazilian scene in general, under serious pressure given the results that they suffered yesterday. Lots of reaction to it from the community. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new, as always. I greatly appreciate it. Here are some of the boys out there in Korea right now. I thought this is pretty nice to see. And also a big update on Itsu we'll get to here in just a second as well. There was a bit more reaction, and maybe understandably, to what transpired yesterday, because Furia got 13 0'd, absolute slammage by Centaurs the day before yesterday, and their coach says the following: I don't know where to start. I want to apologise to the Furia fans and the Brazilian fan base. Yesterday wasn't just the worst match I've ever seen from a team of mine, it was probably the worst performance by a Brazilian team in the VCT. The fact that Basic and I weren't there in person doesn't change the fact that we've got to step up to the plate. I'll take my share of the blame along with the team for the result that we delivered. We've been fully dedicated. We'll review, understand what really happened for the shock of the first game to carry over into the second. Embarrassed by the performance. I'm certain we'll turn things around. It's a mental thing. This week is going to be out there in LA. So he was remote and Basic was remote. So maybe you could get there and give him a hair-dried treatment and, let's say put the team into shape, but I don't think that's especially likely. We had the conversation a couple of days ago about whether it would be possible or a good idea to split the regions up, right? Like, would the Americas be better served as a North America and kind of South America, like, Champions Tour? Maybe. And that's not necessarily to say that the Brazilian players cannot compete, but it is to say that what has transpired over the last few years has moved us in this direction. There was lots of talk from Brazilian teams, even in Tier 2, and now it's transpiring in Tier 1 as well, and it has done at the time, that many of the players down there, it's challenging to find up-and-coming talent when all of the teams are based out in LA, right? Like, they're based in LA for the championship. And it just makes it very challenging for the pipeline in Brazil and for even the practice and for multiple other reasons, really. For those players, they've got to live, in LA, and it's just a different culture and it's not easy for them in many respects. So it shouldn't be, I think, a massive surprise that the Brazilian scene, and really South America in general, but especially the Brazilian teams, are looking very lackluster right now. Okay, Salika's not Brazilian, but their IGL of that great Loud team has gone over to Europe to play for Carmine Corps. We know that Aspas is still around, but he's on MIBR now, right? And it's, let's say the super team that was a thing has now been, let's say, cut apart in many respects. So it's really interesting for the Brazilian scene, and we'll get back to it in a second. This is another update, though. So Itsu is back, and he's actually going to stay with T1 until at least 2027. So he's signed a multi-year contract here. So T1 are confident that Itsu is one of the men to take them forward, and we did see them get that 2-0 win against Zeta Division yesterday. They handled business. They won the game 1 Corona. I think we saw that. The Sunset in the end went 13-6. So, yeah, Zeta, unfortunately for them, go down. We also have, just if I had a little refresh on this one, DRX took down Team Secret. So it was a nice little 2-0 for them. Pretty clear cut. 13-4, 13-4. Wow. So, yeah, Team Secret, no chance. You know what it's like with Team Secret. They'll just deliver a surprising win, and then after that, it all goes downhill again. So this is how it's looking right now in the Pacific. If I hit the reload on these, DRX move into 2-1. Secret at 1-2 with G, with Nongshim as well, and the other game which is about to unfold is Boom Esports versus Paper Rex, which as of recent evidence is also not going to be especially competitive, but it is the Pacific, so as we know, pretty much anything can happen. This is TEC versus JDG, so Titan Esports Club go down again. They, found a way to lose. I think they've started off this stage 0-4 now. It was 13-9 on the Lotus. They then bounced back, but then the Sunset Decider was a 13-11. They put up a good fight on the second half, to be fair, but it wasn't good enough in the end. So JDG get the win there. We also had Bilibili Gaming go down to Trace Esports. That was BLG's first loss. They'd been looking like the team to beat in many respects in the Chinese region. The funny thing is, I don't know who the team to beat is. You'd want to say Edward Gaming, but they're going through some drama, and they've not been very good lately. They brought in a player in Alphabet Man, and then they dropped him, we think, and then GNE is back, and then Simon's probably watching on for the sidelines. It's all a bit of a mess with Edward, and yeah, they're still going to be fine for the World Championship and qualifying and stuff like that, but it's not clear that they are going to be the most competitive Chinese team on the international stage going forward. I mean, in Toronto it was Wolves, and now Wolves are getting absolutely slammed, so it's all rather confusing. Trace Esports up 2-1 on, well, they won 2-1 against Bilibili, and yeah, Huzi tried his best, but it was not good enough in the end. They won the Haven, and then after that, the Icebox was a 15-13 banger overtime game on Bilibili's pick, and then the Ascent in the end was 13-6, so kind of mentally compromised after that one. So the overall results as it stands look like this in the region, and today there's another couple of interesting games. We'll have a look how Wolves and DRG are getting on in a second, but this is the way that the bracket now looks over there, or the group stages. So Trace at 3-1, Bilibili at 3-1, Edward at 2-1, so it's still looking fine for these guys. Qualify for the playoffs, see how it goes from there. And in terms of championship points, Edward are still on top, so they're still okay, but it's, you know, again, far from totally clear cut. We'll see it in a second, just as a quick update really. And then Group Omega is very interesting because, well, Wolves need a turnaround and they need it fast, and well, can they do it against DRG? Let's have a look. It's currently live and they're down, well, they're up 8-5 on the Lotus, and they just won the pistol, so maybe this is the start of the Wolves turnaround. Just to quickly look through that, so these are the championship points in the respective regions, and this is Edward, so they're currently at 12, Bilibili are at 11, XLG are at 11, and Wolves are at 9, so it's very much all to play for in the Chinese region. The other regions are a bit more clear-cut. G2 are at 20 and qualified, Centaurs at 13, they should be fine. I mean, Fnatic are at 16, Heretics at 11, Liquid at 10, and then you guys can just about see PaperX at 13, T1 at 12, Gen.G at 11, and RIQ at 10, DRX at 9. So it's absolutely all over the place in the Pacific, which probably should be no real surprise. But let's talk about the Americas and what's been happening there. This is a slight aside from that, really. Dirka's talking about having a bold title in game. Sassy most certainly agrees and maybe puts in the word. Happy birthday to Asuna as well for yesterday. And I think Asuna has a real opportunity here to help this 100 Thieves team to new heights, because they've made the change that they have. Asuna's been a staple at this team for several years, and we know his playstyle, very unselfish playstyle. You know, he is the guy that will go in first, and people love playing with Asuna because he's great for the team in many respects. But the results obviously haven't been there over the last few years, and maybe this is the iteration of this 100 Thieves roster that finally comes good, and Asuna can get back to being considered as like that talented potential, you know, champion level player that he has been in the past, or at least we've felt like he could be in the past. So, you know, obviously it was his birthday yesterday, and it couldn't get much better of a result than they eventually got. I will say, I was pretty surprised. Like, most of the pick'ems here were going to Loud in this NRG series. I thought it would be a little bit more 50-50, to be fair. And, well, the results in the end speak for themselves. NRG with a 2-0 dub against Loud. And this was a Brock masterclass. You're not probably going to see this type of series from Brock that many times. But yeah, Loud are just in a bit of a shambles, aren't they? And really the Brazilian scene in general, obviously we talked about it at the start of the video, but like we've got to make it very clear that the changes that Loud have made, Robbie BK coming in, Pancada of course, not really performing, and in this series especially, have just put this region in a bit of a downward spiral really. And the fact that NRG, they didn't look that competent a couple of weeks ago. They come in against Loud, they 13-4 them on their map pick, and then they 13-9 them on the Corrode. So, you know, this was a bit of a bloodbath, really. And Loud get absolutely smoked 2-0, wasn't even especially close. And then 100 Thieves. This was a really big series. Like, for 100 Thieves championship ambitions this year, and also for Crew, but this was a massively important series. We know that Crew are a threat in the run-up to the World Championship. They always tend to be. And 100T with their new team, they come in and they get the job done. With Kess in the team, Asuna had a mega day, but really just everyone on 100T was frying, and Crew were nowhere near the level they needed to be at if they wanted to take this series of 100 Thieves. So very impressed by 100T so far, and I'm not especially surprised. I think that I expected them to be better, right? Like, I rate Xander as an in-game leader, and, you know, replacing Boostio with Kess and bringing Xander into the IGL role, that seems to be working pretty well. That doesn't especially surprise me. It's just interesting in hindsight, right, looking at the fact that, yeah, Boostio got dropped and now all of a sudden this team seems to have massively turned the corner. So, you know, there's got to be something to be said about that. Crew picked the Corrode and then got body slammed on it, and then the bind was 13-5 as well. This was, you know, just super crushing from 100 Thieves. Very, very impressive from them, and that puts them, as we just saw, in a better position now in the Americas. So, their next game 100 tiers against MIBR, and then after that they play Loud and then Lev. So 100T really do have an opportunity on their hands here. Like, I think Crew was the game that they, even out of all of those games, Crew might have been the game that they should have been most worried about. And they're currently 2-0 in their group. NRG are at 1-1. Of course, they lost to 100 Thieves in their first game, but NRG are looking pretty good. And look, that group Omega was very difficult to call on paper, and in some respect it still is. But if you look at the fact that the Brazilian region, the South American region in general, kind of struggling right now, it could very much be all to play for. And MRBR lost to Crew, so there's no way that 100 Thieves will feel like they're necessarily going to lose to them either. So all of a sudden, 100 Thieves are looking at an interesting spot because, yeah, in terms of championship points, as we saw a few minutes ago, we'll have a look at the Americas in a bit more detail here. 100 Thieves now at 5 points. They've picked up a couple in Stage 2 so far. And if they win all of their games, they can get to a decent number of points. Maybe not enough, but they can get to a decent number. They still probably need to come top 2 in the playoffs, which, but right now, they at least look good for qualifying for the playoffs. And coming top 2 in the playoffs, especially with G2 with Baby Bay, you know, it's very much all to play for right now around the world of Valorant. So massively intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Just one final discussion I wanted to have I thought was kind of interesting because Rocket Bullet says, can someone explain to me why you would ever have your in-game leader play anything other than Scan Initiator? Because it seems to make the most sense. You put them on the Scan Initiator, they can get more information than anybody else can. They can make the decisions for it. And, you know, so Boo gives his perspective on this. It's kind of a long one, so I just wanted to kind of share it and give you guys the highlights. But Boo says, like, in general, yes, that is the best option, but that's not necessarily, depending on, like, you know, the player and the way that they think they can provide maximal value, that could potentially change. The argument of a Scan Initiator info gathering is not as big. You have so many more info gathering tools, Sentinel Util, Second Initiator info. And of course, if your teammate is good at coordination and communication, then it doesn't necessarily matter, right? Like if whoever's running the initiator role, the scan role, you know, can tell you what they see on their Sova dart, then, you know, there's no reason for you to necessarily run it. And he also mentions that playing smokes is actually a big advantage to an in-game leader because there's no bigger impact utility macro-wise than smokes. So if you make the right decisions with that, you can effectively impact the way that your team is going to play the game. So, yeah, pretty interesting, I thought, assessment on that. And there's obviously different approaches that different teams will have, but I thought it was a pretty interesting assessment really from both sides of the debate. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.